Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last year, when the agreement with Iran was announced, we were told that because we were removing sanctions on Iran for its nuclear program, it still did not preclude us from having sanctions on Iran for the other things they do, support of terrorism, ballistic missiles, whatever. The President wrote to our colleague, Congressman Nadler, last summer during the consideration of the nuclear deal with Iran, and the letter said, I quote, "Critically, I made sure that the United States reserved the right to maintain and enforce existing sanctions and even to deploy new sanctions to address those continuing concerns, which we fully intend to do when circumstances warrant." I'd like your opinion about what additional authority does the administration need now to crack down on Iran's terrible behavior? Would new non-nuclear sanctions violate the terms of the nuclear deal? Does the President have the authority now, enough authority now, to go after Iran for terrorism or for ballistic missiles? Or would Congress need to pass a law to give the President the authority? Mr. Dubowitz.
So, Ranking Member Engel, I mean, the President has always had the authority under IEPA to use executive orders to do whatever he wants with respect to Iran. But I think as Congress realized over the past at least decade, those authorities were insufficient without Congress playing an important role in passing statutes that actually sent a clear message to the international business community that if you did business with Iran and you did business with designated entities, that there would be secondary sanctions that would have a very powerful impact on your ability to then transact globally and particularly with the United States. And I think it's critical to understand that Congress needs to play that role going forward with respect to non-nuclear sanctions. And one example would be on the ballistic missile side that you mentioned. I mean, it's absolutely clear there's 7, 8 sectors of Iran's economy that are providing key technology and parts and components to Iran's missile program. Now, does the President have the authority to designate those sectors of the economy? He does under existing EOs. But I think Congress can play a very important role in holding the administration's feet to the fire on identifying what sectors are playing a key role in Iran's ballistic missile program, and then imposing secondary sanctions on any foreign entities that are doing business with those sectors.
Thank you. Mr. Zarate, do you agree?
Absolutely. What's interesting, Congressman, is that not only is there the patchwork of Iran sanctions-related legislation and sanctions that Ms. Rosenberg talked about, but there's also a whole suite of executive orders based on IEPA that go to the underlying conduct that we're worried about with respect to Iran. I'll just give you a quick list. Terrorism, Executive Order 13224. Drug trafficking, multiple executive orders. Proliferation finance, signed by President Bush in 2005. The cyber executive order, signed by President Obama April 1 of last year. The transnational organized crime executive order. Human rights-related elements of IEPA provisions. The Syria sanctions and executive order. The Yemen executive order. So you go down the line in terms of all of the conduct that we're worried about with respect to Iran. Not only does the administration have the existing authority based on Iran legislation and Iran sanctions, but you also have the ability to affect the underlying conduct based on the way we've applied sanctions aggressively over the last 15 years. It also underscores why the question of Iranian conduct is so important, because we've built the sanctions program that has been so effective on Iran and other targets of these measures around the underlying conduct that they're engaged in. And if they're not changing their behavior, they remain subject to those sanctions as well as the international program. So my answer to you is we have existing authorities. The administration has plenty of authority with which to work. And to Mark's point, I think Congress's role, is to help clarify the lines of where that authority is and, frankly, where the threats still lie from Iran.
Thank you. Ms. Rosenberg, you warn against limitations, and I quote you, that could, quote, undermine the attractiveness or primacy of the U.S. financial system and the dollar as a reserve currency. So let me ask you, what are the risks to the U.S. financial system if oil trade were to be done in, say, euros instead of dollars? With the amount of dollars in circulation compared to euros or other currencies, is it even possible to shift to other currencies? And finally, what would be the impact of restrictions on the use of the dollar on the two U.S. clearance systems, which are Fedwire and CHIPS, and U.S. surveillance of financial flows?
Thank you for the question. It's hard to contemplate the trade of oil not in dollars. It's a massive market, it's highly liquid, and it's overwhelmingly done in the dollar. And even though conversation about de-dollarizing oil transactions has been ongoing for quite a long time, it's difficult to think how that would occur. If, however, there was a substantial amount of oil trade that did occur not in the U.S. dollar, it would, of course, reduce the amount of flow through U.S. clearing mechanisms, financial institutions, of course, which reduces the amount of activity and revenue they can collect there. And also, in addition to physical trade in oil, there's also a tremendous market in what's called paper trade or financial trade, sometimes called speculative trade in oil, that occurs around the physical trading. It occurs mostly in the United States because oil is denominated in dollars, and that business represents a huge amount of commerce that would not be in the United States if a majority or a significant amount of trade moved to a different currency and was therefore cleared in a different jurisdiction. And that's something that, as a key global commodity, as a major global commodity market, should be of interest and concern for people who watch markets, market activity, and the opportunity for raising business in the United States. Essentially, the same is true when you're thinking about Forex transactions or other dollar clearing for those U.S. platforms that clear that in the United States.
Thank you very much.
We go to Eliana Ross-Layton in Florida.
Thank you so much, Chairman Weiss, and thank you.